or no one who can separate. They can't separate you from the truth that you're someone, you are family, and you are meant to be a child of God. Oh, you are a child of God. No matter what the world says or thinks about me, I am a child. I am a child of God. No matter what the church says, decisions, pronouncements on you, you are a child. You are a child of God, and there is nothing or no one who can separate. They can't separate you from the truth that you're someone, you are family, and you are meant to be a child of God. Oh, you are a child of God, and there is nothing or no one who can separate. They can separate you from the truth that you're someone, you are family, and you are meant to be a child of God. Oh, you are a child of
Looks like I'm live. Greetings, everyone. My name is Troy Vaupel, and I want to welcome you to session 2 of So You Want to Build a Hybrid Worship service. Sorry, too many mind, as a friend of mine says. Tonight's episode is going to cover tools and technology, and I'm real grateful to be here tonight and see so many familiar faces joining us, and also a lot of new faces. Just a reminder that we are live streaming on YouTube as well this evening. So I'd like to say hello to everyone who's watching on YouTube. Let me see here. I'm going to go ahead and share our screen. And make sure that that's there. Okay. All right. So everyone can see that. Big thumbs up if you can see my screen. Awesome. Thank you. So tonight, oops, went too far. There we go. So opening thoughts. Like I said, this is episode 2. And if you haven't had a chance to watch last week's session on just kind of the overall thoughts of how to pull off a hybrid worship experience, I really encourage you to do so. We covered some great topics, and more importantly, we had a wonderful testimonial from Jenna in Indianapolis of their experiences hosting a hybrid worship experience. She talked about a lot of great things that I didn't touch on, and it's really beneficial for everyone to listen to their experiences and kind of learn from that. And one just little piece of housekeeping, we're going to ask everyone that is joining us via Zoom to go ahead and keep your microphones muted and throughout the entire presentation. And we'll be taking questions at the end via the chat feature in the Zoom. And if you wouldn't mind holding off on entering questions until we get closer to that. I anticipate there's going to be a lot of questions this evening. And once that chat starts filling up, I don't want to miss any questions. So let's just try and navigate that the best way we can. Okay. I think that's everything. Let's get started. We have a lot to cover tonight. The topics we're going to cover this evening, I'm going to talk about some terminology. It's tech, there's a lot of jargon, and I'm going to be throwing around some terms, and I want to make sure you understand those terms as we get later into the presentation. We're going to address what are the equipment needs that everyone needs to live stream an event, and then we're going to look at a couple of setups. We're going to look at what we have done in our own church, and probably what most congregations are going to look at putting together to do their live stream. Let's address the elephant in the room right off the bat. The big question that everyone has sent me via email this week is, Troy, what is this going to cost? Good friend of mine is an electrician, and anytime he gets asked, what is it going to cost to do a job, his response is always the same. $500,000, it covers everything. It's the worst dad joke ever. But as I've gotten to know him, I understand where he's coming from. When he comes in to do a job somewhere, he doesn't know what the existing electrical wiring is. You know, do we need new switches? Do we need new receptacles? Any of that. So he can't even give a remote ballpark estimate of what it's going to cost. Sadly, that's the same for the live streaming option. I'd love to be able to tell you, expect to spend this exact amount of money, but I don't know. Do you guys currently have an audio board in place? Do you have cameras? Do you have a good internet? You guys have, everybody has a different infrastructure. And more importantly, everyone has a different goal in mind for what they're trying to accomplish via a hybrid worship experience. Do you need 3 cameras or do you only need 1? All those things are going to come into play when you're trying to design a package and expect a cost. What I can tell you is you're going to have to spend some money. But the good news is there are loads of options to do this at a reasonable amount. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we're going on. And it's not going to be as bad as you think. Okay, let's get into some terminology. You'll hear me reference switching or using a switcher multiple times during this presentation. When you talk about switching, what you're talking about is you're switching between what your viewer is watching on your live feed. Okay, if you've got a camera or 2 cameras and you're going to incorporate some graphics, you're going to switch between what the viewer is seeing when they're watching online. Kind of like right now, you're not seeing me, you're seeing my you're seeing my graphics. Okay, if I stop sharing my screen, you'll go back to me. That's what we're talking about. There's 2 options for doing that. There's a physical switcher where you press a button and it changes what people are seeing. And then there's computer software that does the same thing. We're going to cover that in more detail in a little bit. Okay. Exposure and ISO. I could spend 2 days talking to you and explaining this to you, but I'm just going to cover the basics of this. When we talk about cameras and what's important to look for as far as a camera, cameras come with loads of options, and sometimes it's really difficult to make sense of what features are most important when you're trying to select a camera, especially when you're comparing cameras on a budget. Okay, when we talk about exposure, what exposure is talking about is how a video camera makes an image as light passes through the camera lens, hits a sensor, and that's what makes your image. Okay. Exposure is referring to the amount of light that comes through that lens. Okay. If it's a really bright day, then your shutter is going to get smaller because you don't need as much light to get a good image. If it's dark, it's going to open up really wide to let more light come in on it. Okay. The camera lenses only have so much room to adjust that exposure. That's where ISO comes in. ISO is essentially a setting that allows you to brighten or darken your image to compensate for the exposure limitations you may have. As that exposure as that number increases, your image is going to get brighter. Why is this important? Well, the thing I'll caution you with is ISO capabilities have come a long way in the years, but they still vary from camera to camera. If you've ever taken a picture with your iPhone and it's dark, and when you look at the picture, there's a lot of like red and green particles floating around in that, that's called noise. What happens is when your ISO gets too high, it tries to guess what color is supposed to be there, and it comes across as noise. Okay. So when you start looking at cameras, I encourage you to kind of look at what the exposure and ISO limitations are and pay real close attention to what people say happens when you use it. They'll have an impact. Now, if you have a sanctuary that has plenty of abundant light, it's not going to hit you as hard. But if you have a darker sanctuary, you're going to want to pay close attention to this to make sure that you get a quality image. And as you can see from Darth Vader on the screen, you can see a representation of all the different ISO settings as they adjust through the image. At a lower ISO, it's darker. At a higher ISO, it's a little bit brighter. Okay. Another thing we're going to talk about are the different camera types that are out there. We'll talk about fixed lens cameras, which essentially, I'm sorry, my phone's going off. I'm trying to avoid it. Fixed lens refers to kind of like the camera just has one focal length, meaning it's just what you see is what you get, kind of like right here. Now, some fixed lens cameras have the ability to zoom in and out. There's also cameras that are called PTZ cameras, or pan, tilt, and zoom. Pan means turning left and right. Tilting means moving up and down. Zooming is in and out, okay? Most churches are using a combination of both. The fixed lens cameras are a little bit more reasonable. The PTZ cameras are a little bit more expensive. But when you hear me reference those, that's what we're talking about. Okay, latency, and this is the last term we're going to cover. All live streams have a delay. Okay, everyone that's watching on YouTube right now, they're around 30 to 45 seconds behind what everybody in the Zoom room is seeing. Okay, this is intended for a reason. The reason why there's kind of a lag is because people watching in different homes might have a dip in their internet speed at home. If you've ever been watching a movie or a show via streaming service, every once in a while the picture may freeze and you may see a little dial spinning. That's because you have a lag in your internet service. The reason why there's a 45-second delay is because if someone at home starts to experience that, the video doesn't stop. So as their internet catches up, they don't miss anything. In a live stream, if there's a massive lag on the viewer's end, when it catches up, they may miss 5, 10, 15 seconds of video. So they incorporate this lag to accommodate for that. When you're setting up your live stream, especially if you live stream through YouTube, you're going to see this latency button on the screen. And you might be tempted to just click, well, I don't want any delay, and click that button. But I encourage you, this is a normal thing. Everybody does it, and it's an okay thing to incorporate. Okay, some initial concepts to consider. There's a lot of technology out there. And the beauty of that is that there's any kind of equipment you need for any budget, and it's great. The downside of that is, as you've probably started researching camera equipment, computers, and live streaming software, it is really overwhelming when you work through that. But that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about some of the specific things you may need, what to look for when you're shopping, and to kind of help ease that burden of picking the right technology for your service. Okay. I encourage you to start small. Okay. We talked about last week in the goals. What do we want to do from our hybrid worship experience? You know, what can we start with and what are we going to grow into? As Jenna said last night, we're investing in the future of our church. We have learned through live streaming our worship services, or even just holding a pre-produced hybrid worship service, we're now allowed to grow our congregation so far beyond our walls. So we're investing in the future of our ministry work, and it's here to stay. So as you start to look at equipment and purchase things, look at it as we're investing in the future, considering getting equipment that allows you to grow upon it, okay? Don't bust the bank on a camera because camera technology changes. But if you're buying a computer or you're buying a video switcher, look at something that will allow you to add things to it down the road. And most importantly, take a good look at what you currently have in place. Do you have cameras? Do you have cameras? Or cameras? Do you have computers? Do you have audio equipment? A lot of things you currently have, you can repurpose for your live streaming. So you may not have to buy everything. You might only have to buy a couple of things and be live streaming in a day or two. 4K or not to 4K. I'm sure as you've looked at cameras, everybody's probably telling you, you need a 4K camera. 4K is cool, it's hip, it's what everybody's doing. As hip as it sounds, 4K is not the be all, end all. Some things to think about when you're looking at a 4K camera. They can be expensive, okay? The camera, and to get a quality camera with a good lens and a good ISO setting, the storage to record your worship in 4K, and also the internet bandwidth to send a big video signal out of your church can be substantial. The big thing to consider is if you're streaming in 4K, your audience may not even be watching in 4K. So essentially you've spent all this money for no reason. So I encourage you, when you're looking at cameras, you want to look for a camera that records and broadcasts in what's called 1080 or full HD, okay? And simply all that means is in a TV picture, when you see 1080, TV pictures are made up by individual little pixels. When it says 1080, that means that there's 1080 pixels across. And then it'll also say 1920, that's 1920 vertical, okay? That's full HD. And that's kind of what you want to look for. Now, some of the more tech-savvy people in here will say most things broadcast in 720. If you get 1080, it broadcasts in 720, but not vice versa. 1080 cameras are also great too, because you can get a much better image for the money in 1080 than you can in 4K. But if you buy a video switcher that can upgrade to 4K signal down the road, that's where I'm talking about build that infrastructure to grow. Okay, let's get into the nuts and bolts. What do you have to live stream right off the bat? Well, you're going to need a camera and a tripod. I highly encourage a tripod because you don't want a member trying to hold a camera steady for 45 minutes, okay? The nice thing about that is if you're considering live streaming your worship service using your phone, you can find a tripod holder for about $10 on Amazon. And I apologize, I have one and I meant to have it at my disposal to show you, but I forgot to grab it. But the nice thing I will say to that is that these iPhone holders have a thread on them, and it's a universal thread. So any tripod you buy, this mount will attach to it. And even better news, if you have like a microphone stand that you're not using around your church, same thread size. So you can grab that microphone stand, put your iPhone holder on there, and you've got a tripod for $10, okay? Now, you're also gonna need a microphone. Now, if you're using your phone, you might be able to get away with using the microphone that's attached to your phone, or if you're using a video camera with an on-camera microphone, same deal. But if you're going to be 15, 20 feet away from the person speaking with your camera, you're going to want to have a microphone closer to them so you get good audio, okay? If you have a church that has an existing sound system, meaning you have an audio board in place that all the mics are connected to that broadcast to speakers, all you have to do is run a mic or run a cable out of that audio board into your live stream setup, and you're good to go. You're going to need some sort of hardware to live stream. When you're live streaming, the video and audio signal is re-encoded into a format that projects via live stream. Okay. You're either going to need a piece of hardware or a piece of software that'll do that for you. Now, you might be thinking, Troy, I've done Facebook Live or I've live streamed via my webcam on YouTube all the time, and I've never used that. If you're using one camera and microphone and you're going straight to Facebook Live or streaming through YouTube, they automatically do that for you. But if you're in a setup where you have multiple cameras and maybe multiple audio and you've got a computer connected for graphics, you're going to need something that transcodes that into that signal. We're going to talk about this a little bit more later on. And then, of course, you might need some cabling to connect everything. You might need some HDMI cables. If you invest in a little bit higher end video camera, an SDI cable, you might need some audio cables. You might need some Ethernet cables too for the internet. Now, one of the things I want to talk about real quickly, if you can, I highly recommend that your computer is connected via an Ethernet cable. You can totally live stream using Wi-Fi. I've done it dozens of times, but it does fill you with a little bit of anxiety that if the Wi-Fi goes out or you have a lot of people connecting to your Wi-Fi, and let's be honest, it's a church and everybody has access to the Wi-Fi. You start sharing a lot of bandwidth, you may run into an issue where you start to have a dip in your bandwidth usage. But if you're hardwired connected, you don't have to worry about that. Okay, the one camera setup. It's a great option to consider because almost everybody has a smart device. And it's a good option to consider because iPhones have great video quality, so do Androids and even iPads. They have great video quality, they have a microphone built in, and it works really well. You can stream directly to YouTube or Facebook without any additional equipment. Now, the only thing you want to be considerate of, be mindful of how you use it. Like I said, if you're going to set the camera up all the way in the back of the sanctuary and someone's going to be speaking on the opposite end, you want to be considerate of, we're going to need another audio source. That's easy to navigate. And also, again, like I mentioned, the internet concerns. This is Wi-Fi only. And if your Wi-Fi goes out, you really are in a pickle. Now, you can also do multiple cameras. Now, depending on your sanctuary size and those goals we talked about last week, what do we want our virtual viewers to take away from our service? I recommend that 2 cameras are ideal, but I want to emphasize it's not required, okay? The reason why 2 cameras are ideal is it really enhances your virtual experience. You have different camera setups, you have different shots. It looks great, okay? It makes your video look a little bit more polished, a little bit more professional, like you did the extra work to make it look and you're investing in the finished product. Now, with this, if you're going to have multiple cameras, I recommend that you have one camera that's just sitting in the back of the sanctuary that gives a beautiful shot of the entire sanctuary, and then potentially having a second camera that is one of those PTZs, the pan, tilt, and zoom cameras, and then you'll need a remote controller to change those shots. You're not going to have a camera operator standing in the middle of the sanctuary on a headset and you're giving instructions, get a little bit closer. Oh, too close, get a little bit wider. So you're going to want a PTZ camera. The nice thing about having 2 cameras as well is when you're adjusting that close-up shot, you can be on a wide shot so people don't see you moving the camera around. So PTZ cameras, this is an example of a PTZ camera. This is what we installed in Bethlehem, and I'm going to talk to you about what we did in a couple of minutes. And like I mentioned, it has a remote controller on the bottom that can adjust all of the settings you need. It'll pan it, it'll tilt it, it'll zoom it. You can manually focus, you can set up to autofocus, okay? What's really cool about these remote controllers too is that if you use the same kind of shot in multiple services week after week, you can pre-program them. So if your minister is going to come out from behind the pulpit and stand in front of the altar, you can program a button and just tap it and it'll move right into position. So if you have multiple people providing tech support week after week, you can easily train them how to do that. The remote control has the ability to control multiple cameras. So say out the gate, you start with 2 cameras, but in a year, you might do 3 or 4. You can add cameras to this down the road. Again, that infrastructure to grow into, okay? The really awesome thing about PTZ cameras is they're about this big. So if you want to put them somewhere where they're not an eyesore for the congregation, they're really easy to mount and hide away from everybody's eye line. Now, a couple of examples of some fixed camera options, okay? There are a variety of fixed camera options. You can use a webcam. You can use a conference cam. As you can see on this picture here, there's what's called the Hudley conference camera. I teach a broadcasting class in high school, and when we went back into school to start teaching, we had a lot of students who chose to virtually learn. We use this camera in every classroom. It connects via USB right into a computer, and it's up and running with little fuss. The nice thing is, too, this comes with a software feature that allows you to zoom in and out with it. So you can, if you were to use something like this as a camera option in your sanctuary, you can have that wide shot, but say something's happening to the altar and you want to see it a little bit better, you can zoom into that. And then also PTZ makes a camera like that as well, and we have one of those in our sanctuary. Okay, let's talk about how to do the stream. We've covered the tech, and as you're looking at cameras, like I said, do the research, reach out to people you know who understand cameras, and just, it takes a lot of legwork, but it's worth it. And like I said, pick a budget. You can find a good option for any budget. And you can, I had a member of a church in Indianapolis reach out to me last week. And as we were talking, he said to me, we got a grant last year. We bought a couple of video cameras. We're going to repurpose one of those to be our wide angle fixed shot. We're going to buy one PTZ camera and we're going to integrate everything ourselves. So they used what they had and they built upon it. And I think that's a great plan. Let's talk about how you actually stream the service, okay? There's essentially 2 basic setups. There's a hardware-based setup where everything is just equipment you buy, and then there's a software-based setup where everything's run via computer. We went the hardware route, but I'm going to talk in detail about the software route because I think that's what the majority of you are going to consider. The advantages of a hardware-based setup is there's a lot more flexibility. Okay, these units are easily added to. With a computer, you're going to have to add components. With this, you're just plugging something in. It's easily integrated and expandable. The nice thing about it too is it allows more people to be involved during the live stream. If you have somebody running the switcher, you can have somebody else controlling the camera and someone else running the live stream. If everything's connected to one laptop, that person is at total control of everything. The disadvantage, it's a larger upfront investment. It costs money because you're buying a lot of equipment. And also, too, it may require an outside vendor to install. This is how we did it. This is our command center at Bethlehem. As you can see, there's a monitor. A switcher is the black device with the red and green light on it. You see our camera controller. I have a laptop for full screen graphics. And then that laptop to the right is what starts and stops our live stream. I'm a working video pro. This looks like a news studio that I've worked in for years. I'm comfortable with this. And as I mentioned before too, we were really fortunate. We have a trust in our church, and that family wanted to make an investment in a campus upgrade well before the pandemic, specifically towards technology. We had a plan in place to purchase this equipment before the pandemic. And then once the pandemic happened, and like everybody else, we thought any day now, we're going to come back to worship. It's not going to be a year. It's going to be a few more weeks. When we do that, we're going to need to be able to live stream the moment we come back. And it could be in a week. So we've got a plan. Let's just jump into it. And we have the resources to do it. So we did this. And it's wonderful. But it's not how everybody needs to do it. What do we have at Bethlehem? We have 4 cameras. We have 2 fixed and 2 PTZ cameras. We have one camera mounted at the back of the sanctuary that's fixed, two pan, tilt, and zoom cameras on either side of the sanctuary. And then we have an additional fixed camera that's kind of a roving camera. I can just plug it into the wall and put it wherever I want. If we have a special musician that I want to feature, if we have a special event, something of that nature, a lot of flexibility. As you can see from our switcher will allow 8 devices to be connected to it. We can really grow into this, but we have a really large sanctuary. The company we hired to do this integration for us recommended it, and I think it was a good choice for us. We also have a solid state drive recorder, and that's at the bottom. Why do we have a solid state drive recorder? Let me tell you. Everything that we do in our studio or in our sanctuary goes into that recorder and it records it live. If the internet goes out, I have a recording that I can bring back to my office, re-encode, put it online, and everybody can watch it. Okay. Because we went the hardware option, we needed that Matrox Monarch video encoder to encode that signal going out to the internet. This is our setup. Now, real quickly, if I can find it, I'll show you a quick example of what I'm talking about. This is our fixed camera from the back of the sanctuary. And you can see how it has a nice, lovely shot of the entire sanctuary and everything that's going on. Now, as the worship goes on, you can see this is one of the cameras on the side. This is the pan, tilt, and zoom option. Nice close-up shot of our minister. And then we can go back and forth. Our bell choir performing, nice wide shot of them. As we scroll on, this is our other pan, tilt, and zoom camera on the opposite side of the sanctuary with a nice shot of them as well. Do you have to do this? Absolutely not. It just looks nice and it gives a nice presentation. Okay, let's talk about the software-based setup. Advantages. It's less expensive out the gate because you're not buying a lot of equipment. It's controlled by computers. Most churches have a computer already at the ready. And if not, you probably have someone in your congregation who's willing to donate one and you can build everything to it that you need. It can be installed and maintained by your internal tech team, which is really great. Few disadvantages. The setup can be a little bit tricky. As you're connecting devices to it, some devices don't like to share, so you might have to mitigate which camera can be controlled by a certain service, but that's easy to navigate. Existing computers might have some limitations. Your hard drive storage might not be large enough to record a lot of services. You might not have a lot of USB inputs. Even if the internet goes out, you're kind of in a pickle. If you're going this route, and I highly recommend that a lot of you consider this because it's a great option and I use it all the time. I want to introduce you to your brand new best friend in the whole wide world, Open Broadcast Software, or OBS. It's open source, meaning it's created by users. People who live stream all the time create the software, okay? If you've ever watched a live stream on YouTube, or if you're a video gamer on Twitch and things of that nature, almost 90% of them are using OBS to control their live stream. It's free. I say that again, it's free. You can use any camera or audio source connected to your camera as a video source. It connects directly to your platform that you're going to live stream to. As Jenna said last week, go where your audience is. And OBS will connect directly to Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, Zoom, all of it. And it's very simple to set up. And it's updated frequently. The users who create this are constantly trying to find new ways to make it easier to use, to expand on that use, and it's wonderful. Few things to consider when you're getting into OBS. The big limitation is you can only have as many sources connected to your OBS live stream as you have available USB inputs. So if you want 2 cameras and audio coming in, you're going to need 3 open USB inputs. If you want more than that, you're going to need more. That's the only big limitation with OBS. There's a little bit of a learning curve. With any piece of software out there, the interface is unique. So you need to plan on taking some time to get familiar with it. The great thing is there are tons of tutorials on YouTube on how to learn OBS. Once you understand it, it's real easy to navigate. And also, it's really great because what you do in OBS, you can record your live stream directly to your computer. So you have that recording backup if something goes awry. All right. I got through that a lot quicker than I thought, which is good because it's going to leave time for questions. Troubleshooting, or as I like to say, what do I do when it all goes? So the first weekend we came back to in-person worship was April 11th. We had this equipment installed in late August, September of last year. We had live streamed an event here or there. We did a memorial service for one of our members who passed away during the pandemic. We live streamed a live music Sunday. We even live streamed Christmas Eve service with just our minister and our organist. All of it went off without a hitch. The weekend we were going to come back into in-person worship, I live streamed a wedding from our sanctuary the day before. Perfect. First morning we come back to worship, everyone's excited. A lot of people are joining in via live stream. I didn't think about testing it because it worked the day before. I hit go live. I'm sitting there and I'm just enjoying the worship, the beginning of worship service. I'm listening to the audio through our video switcher and it sounds great. And all of a sudden I look over and I just see my phone buzzing constantly. I thought it was just a lot of people sending me messages, celebrating that we were back. Everything was great. And all of a sudden, one of our tech support team who was running audio leaned over and said, the audio coming out of the live stream is all static. And there was nothing I could do. Once we started live streaming, there was nothing I could do to navigate it, troubleshoot it. I was in the middle of switching between sources, integrating graphics. I knew in my head that the recording I was doing was going to be fine. But we hadn't really discussed what are we going to do if something goes wrong? How are we going to communicate it? How are we going to address it? And we had a redundant backup, but it was pretty embarrassing for me and I was pretty frustrated. So I'm going to encourage you, plan for something to go wrong because it's not if, it's when. Internet's going to go out. Computer's not going to boot up. Camera controller is going to go offline. Something is going to happen. Have a plan in place for how you're going to troubleshoot that when it happens, okay? Have a backup plan. Like I said, the live stream signal was nothing but static, but because I had that localized recording, I came home, went to my office, re-encoded it, had it online within 2 hours after worship was over, and everybody could join us in worship, not live, but a little bit later. Communicate. Communicate to your ministry team, communicate to your online viewers. We know something's gone wrong. We're sorry, we're fixing it, but later on, you'll be able to join us in worship service. You know, I was trying to navigate that and communicate with everyone. Yeah, I know. Thank you for reaching out. But again, it's like Jenna said, having that large team in place is vital and it just makes it better. Last but not least, breathe. Things happen. Don't take it personally and let your congregation know that things like this are going to happen from time to time. And it's just part of it. As I tell everyone all the time, technology is great as long as it works. Okay, final thoughts before we get into the Q&A. If you're overwhelmed, don't be. It's a lot to consider. And I've covered a lot of things tonight that you need to think about. But the beauty of it is there's a lot of options and there's a perfect solution for what you're trying to accomplish in your church. Reach out to people, ask questions, look for support. You're going to figure it out and it's going to be great. Which leads into something that I've said to a lot of people during the pandemic. The grass is not greener. We're all going to be tempted to watch what other churches are doing. And we're going to feel like, gosh, they're doing it so much better than we are. It's not always necessarily true. All of our congregations are different. And what they want and what they expect is so unique from one church to the other. It's good to look at what other churches are doing. It's good to reach out to them and ask them, you know, how did you do this? How did you do that? And consider it. But do not compare yourself to what other churches are doing. We're all doing the best we can. It's all good. Everyone is joining us to get teachings of Christ and some sense of peace in their life. And just continue to evaluate what you're doing, grow in your ministry work, and be confident in what you're doing is the best you can be and feel comfortable with that. And then one last thing I want to show you, because we have a couple of moments before I go to questions. So this is the interface of OBS real quick, just so you can see it out the gate. As you can see right here, this little thing jumping right here shows that there's an audio source. So it's picking up audio from my webcam. And then if I turned my camera off of Zoom, you could actually see it pop up in here. But this is the interface. And when you go in here, you easily just click on the settings. And when you go here to stream, you can see right here, it shows service, YouTube. You copy the stream key, you paste it into your YouTube live account. These two start talking to each other. You're connected. Once you get your equipment set up and you start streaming, you're live streaming. Okay. I hope I didn't rush too much through that, but I wanted to cover all that stuff, but I also wanted to leave a lot of time for questions. And the chat is open. All questions, please share them with me. I'm ready to go. And if there's no questions, that means I just did an amazing job. Okay, I don't know the cost, but I can tell you, I actually looked that up earlier today. Let me find that real quick. I have it, I just have to find it. It is a black magic design. It is a HyperDeck Studio recorder. One of the things I forgot to mention, after this is over, I'm going to provide a link to some of these items that I have mentioned today, and we're going to be able to share that with the congregations as a resource of just kind of a starting point of where to go. I meant to put that together today, and the day got away from me, and I apologize. And the cost of that recorder, you asked, was $995. Oh, the Ethernet option, or please explain the Ethernet connection and why can't it be used in the software-based model? Absolutely. The Ethernet connection is just how you're connected to the internet, and that's totally how you use it. I just was saying that whenever you're sending your live stream to the internet, I encouraged you to be connected to the internet via an Ethernet cable and not your Wi-Fi. Digital versus optical zoom. There's pros and cons with both, and that comes back to that added feature I talked about a little bit earlier. When you're looking at cameras at different price points, what they end up doing is they'll pick some of the features that they want to be better, but keep that cost down. So sometimes maybe the camera lens is a little bit better quality, but it uses a digital or optical zoom and it's not as good. And then other times it's vice versa. You might have a better optical digital zoom and the exposure settings are a little bit lower. It's a fine balance. My professional video camera that I use just to go out and record, it has a zoom range and it also has a nice exposure lens, but it has kind of an optical zoom feature if I wanted to do like a super zoom. And it's good to a point. As you start to get closer and closer within that, it's kind of cheating that optical zoom and it ends up losing quality. What I encourage you to do, if you're looking at maybe purchasing a camera, there's a website called bnhphoto.com, photovideo.com. It's a video production wholesale company out of New York City. What's really great is their prices are extremely competitive. And what's even better is you can demo equipment for 30 days. And if you don't care for it, you can send it back for a full refund. And you can research it. They have an online tech support that's really great about, you can explain to them, this is what I'm looking, and they'll give you loads of options to consider. And it's a really great resource. My best thing to say with cameras is try to demo them out to see how they work. But honestly, depending on how big your sanctuary is, the typical Zoom function that's within it is going to work whether you go optical or digital. Yep, and the conference will also compile a document with some resources and provide it in the near future. Thank you for that, Nikki. You are a blessing. Okay, Zoom versus YouTube versus Facebook, etc. They all work. Okay. Jenna talked about this last week, and I thought it was the best way to describe it. Consider where your audience is, and that be the first place you start live streaming. If you want to set up Zoom to be kind of that little environment that you live stream to, totally do it. Some people don't like to use Zoom because of the whole migration of that, where they feel like just going to Facebook and going to YouTube is more convenient. Now, alternatively, after a year of everybody doing everything virtually, a lot of people are really comfortable with using Zoom. It's a great source to do that. What I encourage people to consider, though, is try to stream to more than one location. We're streaming directly to our website through the company that we purchased all of our equipment to. But at the same time, I'm also streaming to YouTube. Why YouTube and the website? Well, YouTube is a great place to market and advertise your church, to reach out beyond your church walls, to look for that church shopper. Also, too, it's a little bit easier to get people to just be looking for a worship service and land on our page. We can promote that a lot easier than we can our website. The nice thing is that if you're streaming to YouTube or Facebook, because it's an online platform, it's going to pop up in people's feeds. And if you put in the description box below it, thank you for joining us in worship this week. We'd love for you to learn more about our congregation. Visit our website. By having that as part of your window, you might get people who are enjoying your message, enjoying your service, clicking on that link, then going to your website. And that's where we want people to really end up, right? We want people on our website learning about our church, maybe reaching out and all of that. But honestly, where you choose to live stream is kind of based mostly on what your congregation typically likes to use. If you have an older congregation, they're probably Facebook happy. If you have a younger congregation, YouTube's going to be the place to go. Or do you choose to do Zoom like we're doing tonight, which you can easily integrate that as well. OBS will use Zoom just as well. And you can actually also, too, I want to mention this, you can use Zoom as a source in OBS. You can pull this into OBS and actually have someone talking and use them as a source during your service. So say you wanted to integrate someone who wasn't in town as a guest speaker during your live stream, you can integrate that as well. There's not one perfect social media place to live stream to. All right. Okay, tech needs for integrating images or slides within a live stream. Timothy, that is a great question. Thank you for asking. If you're going the hardware-based model like Bethlehem did, we just run that laptop with graphics directly into our video switchers. I press a button, that goes full screen. Within OBS, you will just load that as a source in your little window before the worship, and it has a little eyeball icon. And when the eyeball's open, it's to the screen, and when it's closed, it's gone. The tricky thing is, and I unfortunately have not found a perfect solution for this, but I'm working on it, is if you want to have like a lower third graphic on the screen where you see me talking, but maybe my name comes up, OBS can do that. The hardware option, I haven't found a perfect way of doing that yet. We currently use a subscription-based service for song lyrics that we have a subscription fee that we've used forever. It's really great. And when you pull up like scripture readings or songs of that nature, you can select the name and it automatically creates a slideshow with all those graphics. Unfortunately, I can't send that out as just the graphics and then put any video behind it I want, but I'm working on it. I've read that there are ways to use different presenting software and a converter into that, so then you can have your sanctuary or your organist playing and have those graphics on the screen. But that's the easy way to do it. You can either go directly through a video switcher with a cable and just control it through your laptop, through the video switcher, or within your software. You just create those graphics beforehand, load all of them as a source. And as you're having your worship service and you decide to say, put the call to worship on the screen, you just turn that on, and that's what everybody at home sees. So let's see. Yes, the recorder would connect to your live stream box. That's correct. For our setup, that's how I asked them to do that. So it comes out of our video switcher into our recorder, out of our recorder, and it loops into our live stream box. The reason why I did that is that everything that we do in the sanctuary during the worship goes directly into that recorder, so I have a clean signal. If it went into the stream box, then out of the stream box into the recorder, if the stream box goes kaput, then I can't get that signal back out. So that's why we set that up that way. Yeah, and the copyright laws with YouTube versus church website. Yeah, we touched on this last week. YouTube and Facebook have their own internal algorithms for checking to see that you have the legal rights to use a specific cut of music. And if you don't, it might stop your live stream kaput, okay? Right in the middle of your live stream. Now, the workaround for that is, like in our church, we pay for the rights to sing songs within our sanctuary walls only. When we started live or doing our virtual worships last year, we had to pay an additional fee to be able to put that online. Now, you can take a copy of that license agreement and register it with YouTube and Facebook so they don't come at you with a copyright claim. I can tell you, we've live streamed 3 weeks now. I've not had one copyright claim streaming to YouTube, and none of our streams have stopped. I think that because you're live streaming through a nonprofit, they don't really watch that as closely, say if I had a private channel. And I also know that copyright claims don't arise so much because we're not a monetized social media channel. So we're not making money from YouTube because of our YouTube content. So they're not as strict with that. Absolutely, to get started, you can just set up a laptop in the front pew facing the pastor and use Zoom. 100% you can. And also too, if you wanted to invite people to join a Zoom meeting and they're watching the Zoom with your webcam, watching the minister, you can totally do that. And also too, you can download OBS for free and send Zoom to Facebook or YouTube if you want. You don't have to do that the first day because you're trying to see, I just want to get the laptop to work. But absolutely, you can do that option. And that's a great option to begin with. And like I said, you can expand on that down the road. That's a really great question. I'm glad you asked that. And I did speak to someone within our congregation earlier today. And what she was talking to me about was that they had bought an iPad package, and the form's right over here. But they started to basically bought like an iPad bundle. And the iPad came with a tripod and a holder. It came with some software for live streaming, and it came with some devices that fit over the camera lens to change your view, a wide angle lens, a zoom lens. And that option costs $1,700. And they're going to use that not just for live streaming, but also their ministry work from within the congregation. And it was an interesting package. And I think as we start to look at this model growing down the road, you're going to see many more options like that out there. Packaged bundles. So you can buy all the hardware you need because they know most churches are probably going to use OBS to migrate to YouTube and Facebook and then redirect that into your website. That's something to talk about real quickly as well. If you have a church website and whether you've, take care of it internally or you're using an outside organization, they would have the ability to direct, if you're streaming directly to YouTube or streaming to Facebook, to redirect that as well back to your website. So instead of us who are going to our website, then to YouTube, you can go to YouTube and bring that back to your website. And one thing I want to talk about that's really important, Jenna talked about this last week. I told you she was phenomenal. The nice thing about streaming also to a Facebook or a YouTube, as well as your church website, is that you can encourage your virtual audience to share that they're watching the service and post the link to maybe invite people to join them in worship. This is one of the things our church has always struggled with when we're encouraging people to invite people to join them into worship. They're real anxious about, I don't know, it makes me feel kind of weird to ask somebody to join me in church. And I know it's an obstacle many people do, but in a virtual environment, we don't have such reservations. It's something I've been doing each week, every Sunday, right as worship's beginning. I post a link to our website and invite all my friends to join us in worship. And I post a link to our website. I post a link to YouTube. By going to those social media applications and implementing those as well, just gives you that opportunity to really share what you're doing and encouraging people to do so. And you're encouraging your congregation to be advocates for your church as well. Okay. The paid services to OBS. Love the questions. These are so good. There are paid subscription services that are the equivalent of OBS. Are they easier to use? A little bit, but not as much as they advertise. One example is a website called Restream.io. Restream is a lot like OBS. The interface is a little bit easier. What's nice about Restream is, again, it will connect any device you have connected to your computer as a source. What's really nice about it is you can invite participants into your room and you can make them an active participant in your live stream as well. They have graphic overlays pre-built. You can load videos. So say you decide we're not singing in worship right now, but we're going to have members record themselves singing at home and submit those to us as use of special music during worship. You can preload those videos into Restream, play them, go back and forth, back and forth. It's great. I've actually used this. I used this to live stream a fundraising event a few weeks ago, and it worked wonderfully. But it's $30 a month. It's not a lot, but it is a good option. I was in a meeting with the IKC a couple of weeks ago, and someone mentioned another option now that I can't remember, but it's very similar to Restream. It is a little bit easier friendly, and connecting it to different social media hubs is a breeze, because all you do is hit connect to Facebook, log in your credentials, it automatically connects it. And as you pay for a higher premium, you can live stream to multiple sources with the click of one button, as opposed to if you're in OBS, when you start your live stream in OBS, you got to go over to YouTube and start, Facebook Live and start. A couple extra button clicks, but it's very easy to do. But yeah, I do encourage you to look at sources like that, Restream, and any kind of paid option. They are a little bit easier, but also OBS gives you the ability to use pre-recorded or pre-produced videos as part of your presentation as well. Okay. We've talked about so much, and I hope that I didn't rush through this because I know it's highly technical, but I wanted to hit everything tonight and allow room for questions. And, if you have questions down the road, don't hesitate to reach out, and I'm happy to help you with that. Do we have any other questions? I hope I didn't scare everybody off. I'm real self-conscious. I'm a big I get become fast talker. And sometimes when I'm talking tech, I feel like everybody kind of knows where I'm coming from. And I kind of get carried away. All right. Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions, but we're letting someone in. Maybe he'll come in with a question. But if there aren't any other questions, that's going to cover everything that I had for you tonight. And like I said, I know it can seem a little bit overwhelming, and it's not. And great questions tonight, but like some people said, can I just sit a laptop in the front row and live stream via Zoom? And that's great. And like I said, if you want to do the same thing, if you just want to put an iPhone in the front pew and record via your phone and go directly to Facebook Live or YouTube to begin with, that's great too. And some churches too, that I want to mention this too, before we sign off, something to consider. And this is something that we've been looking at our church the past couple of weeks. We've live streamed 3 worship services. When we look at the amount of people who have been watching our live stream, it's like 4 people on a Sunday morning, which is kind of deflating. As the week goes on, we're at 70, 80 views. So a lot of people, I think, are still in that mindset of it's virtual worship. We can worship at our own convenience. And I think we're going to have to keep that in mind as we start looking at numbers and how many people are watching our service as we go on. We may not see a lot of people watching it, joining us live at 10:15 or 8:30, whenever our service is. But watch those numbers as the week goes on. And I think that's when you'll start to see that. So if you're considering at the onset of going back to in-person worship, if you still want to pre-produce your worship service as along with having an in-person and a pre-produced virtual service, consider to continue to do that. If that's more convenient for you, easier for you as you figure out how to do everything moving forward, that's a great option. Okay. OBS does work on Mac. Thank you, Chad, for sending me that. Yes, OBS is compatible with Mac or PC. I've not used it on Mac. I'm a PC guy, but I do know people that have used that. When you go to download it, it'll give you that option. Switcher, is that a software, Tom? You're going to make me Google that, aren't you? Wow, look at that. No, unfortunately, no, I don't, Tom. But it has a free trial on their website. That's pretty nice. Unfortunately, no, I don't know anything about that, but I encourage you to explore that. It looks like from the website that shows somebody using a phone, so that might be an option. I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I hope this was helpful for everyone. And thank you so very much for joining us tonight and listening to me prattle on for an hour about all of this. Like I said, this is being also live streamed to YouTube and recorded, and it will be there for you to review later if you kind of forget some things or you want to follow up and do this again. Reach out to your tech team, encourage them to watch this as well. Do your research and figure out the plan that works best for each of you. Thank you all again so much for this opportunity. It's really been great to provide this webinar to everyone. And it's also been beneficial for me because as I've put this presentation together, I've identified some things our church hasn't considered, and it's really helped us look at how we're going to improve on our hybrid worship moving forward.
Hey friends, this is Nikki. I just want to say out loud, thank you to Troy and thank you all for being with us. I'm going to end our stream at this time and end our Zoom. Remember that you can email us at ikc@ikcucc.org, and we will forward those questions on to Troy so that he will basically never stop being our resource until the end of his days, for which we are very grateful. Friends, go in peace and with blessings, and may all your worship services, hybrid, in-person, and virtual, be meaningful and inspiring to the people that you serve.